Kevin has nearly 2 decades of experience at the intersection of advocacy, strategic communications, and industry relations. I was on staff at the chamber when Kevin was hired. No, I'm going to tell him you're a Hawkeye fan. I'm going to put all the tea out there. It's happening right now. Watch it. But no, the truth is, when Kevin was hired, we knew he was going to be a force in the industry, and look at him now. As vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, he manages external affairs, including advocacy, economic development, and organizational initiatives. Prior to joining the chamber, here comes that Hawkeye thing. Prior to joining the chamber, Kevin was a legislative assistant in the Wisconsin legislature, has a BA in journalism and mass communication and poli-sci, because he's that kind of cat, from the University of Iowa. And in 2017, he was named Development Counselors International's 40 Under 40, Rising Economic Development Stars in North America. This morning, Kevin is here to present the Madison pitch and the chamber's work selling the place that we all call home. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Little.
Good morning. Thank you, Mark. I was just trying to remember that first week at the chamber, but here's my first impressions of Mark, of a week of working with Mark. Very kind, very funny, very generous, very smart and optimistic, which is why I just couldn't comprehend why he would put himself through the misery of being a Bears fan. It just didn't, none of this stuff. And so a lot of our conversations over the years have actually been about that. It's not too late, Mark. Like, there's time to get some help. You know, there can be better times for you. But that's my only criticism of Mark. Otherwise, you're about as close no, there's one more. The guy refuses to age. I don't know when you met Mark, but he looked exactly like he looks right now, right? Like Madison's own Dick Clark, for sure. I can tell I just lost anyone under the age of 40 with that reference. I apologize. We can move on from that. But thank you, Mark. I appreciate you, my friend. And thanks also to DMI for this invitation, Madeline, John Ternelia, the vice president of DMI. We really appreciate it. And I won't take offense that Jason decided to do other things today. So part of my role at the chamber is that I get to work with startups, which is really exciting to kind of see all of the different new and emerging ideas that are happening in the region. And there are many. In the startup world, if you're a company founder and you're out raising money, you have what is called a pitch deck. So this is your presentation about who you are, what you do, what problem you're solving, who your customers are, why people should trust that you're the right people to solve this problem. And for an investor, why investing money into your company is going to yield a return for them. And, you know, depending on, the audience and how much time you have, that there's different versions of what that pitch ultimately looks like. Well, the same is true for places. And as an organization, one of many organizations that is working to try and sell place and try and get more companies to invest here, more talent to want to locate here, we also have a pitch deck that we use, and there's many different versions of that deck depending on who we're looking to talk to. Oftentimes, it is a company that would like to understand what the opportunities are here, why they should want to invest more of their company here. Sometimes it's to potential talent that is interested in relocating. Sometimes, like today, our team is actually down in Chicago right now pitching a major airline with the hopes that we can get back some of the daily nonstop service that was growing pre-pandemic to come back to our airport, which we're very excited about. This is actually in partnership with our friends at DMI and Destination Madison. I think there's been some really good conversations, and I'm hopeful that you're going to see the return of more of those flights very soon in the future. But like I said, the pitch continues to evolve. Just like our region, it changes, the narrative changes, but the importance of it doesn't stop, to continue to tell this story. And the reason why that is we're really having a moment right now in our region. A lot of things are happening. We're seeing a big in-migration of talent right now for our size. Rich Litch and I were just talking about that. All of the cranes that are in the sky, all of the housing developments, and it's still not enough, right? We're having a lot of in-migration, which is good. We also have a really high workforce participation rate, which is great. We also have a vibrant economy, a lot of jobs that are growing across many different industries. And we also have a very low unemployment rate. In fact, over the last 18 months, we've had among, at times, the lowest unemployment rate in the country. All of these things can be true, where more people are moving here, yet we still have a low unemployment rate. And what that means is that we're actually facing a talent imperative right now, that despite the increasing supply of talent, it's not keeping pace with the demand that we have right now in the workforce. So that's why we need to do more to continue to get outside of our borders, tell the story, tell about the opportunities that exist here. And hopefully people can feel that true sense of belonging and see that opportunity that exists here in the region. So to tell that story, it starts by figuring out what is authentic to our region. What is the motivating case for why you would want to be in Greater Madison? So we asked that question. We started this work about a decade ago, and we started to ask people what they think Madison's brand is. And some of the things that we would hear are athletics. We've got an excellent sports commission, right, Jamie, working to bring more sports and recreation and leverage what we have here. You might think of the University of Wisconsin. You might think about us being a state capital city, or maybe we're our quirky culture and drum to a different beat. You might think about this, right? It's a great place to live and raise a family, right? It's what we've been talking about for decades. Money Magazine says so, right? All of these things are true. And when you're talking about climate, you might talk about our luscious tropical environment, our palm trees, our sun-soaked beaches. And is that pitbull? All right, so maybe not authentic to our climate, but what if people's perception of our climate is only this, that it's a frozen, cold, desolate college town? I'm going to come back to climate later because, believe it or not, it actually is a part of our pitch that we give to people. But when we worked with an organization out of London several years ago to sample people across the country and say, what do you think? When you hear Madison, what do you think about? What comes to mind? Anything, just name something. And here's what they said. 70% had no answer, nothing, like no awareness at all. Couldn't, I don't know, can't tell you a single thing. And that may sound bad, but actually it just means that we have a blank canvas. People just don't know what's going on here. Like if we had said Flint, Michigan, there'd probably be a much higher brand awareness, but maybe it wasn't a positive one. Maybe you're working to overcome a perception that might be negative about your community. So again, sounds bad, but also an opportunity, a blank canvas. And now it's just about figuring out, well, what is that motivating case? So we started testing different brand positioning statements with the same group and said, does this sound authentic to you as somebody who's not familiar with the area? And here were the top two brand positionings that were most effective. The first was down to earth. So that's that good life photo from earlier, a great place to live and raise a family, which makes sense, right? It's what we've been selling for decades. The other winning position was experiences over possessions. So this is the Seeker brand. And what the Seeker brand speaks to is that we're relentless, that we're pushing boundaries, we're trailblazers, we don't accept the status quo. And importantly, we value experiences over possessions. So when we had this positioning incorporated into both our past and future aspirations, right, it speaks to who we are, but also who we aspire to be. And taking what we learned from that work, we set out to start building content to help build this story, craft this narrative that we can all be saying. And we started by talking with employers that were doing national recruiting and said, okay, let's say you're talking to somebody, a potential recruit who fits in that 70% demographic. They have no idea anything about Madison, nothing about Wisconsin. What is that conversation like? And we learned a couple of things from those conversations. The first was everybody tells the story differently. Right? Everyone's got a different story that they're selling about why you'd want to be here, why you'd want to live here, the job opportunities that exist here. The second thing that we learned, and this is across all industries, is what we heard is, look, if we can just get somebody to visit, they're often sold on the community, and then it's just about the job, right? We know that, which is a great thing. We know that experience matters to help get people to want to be here. But we also know it's not really realistic to fly everybody to Madison. How do we make those experiences more portable, more accessible? So we started working with some local virtual reality talent that is here to create a first of its kind virtual reality platform. that shows off all of the great things about what it's really like to live here. And so I'll give you show you what it looks like when you put on a virtual reality headset. You're transported to an apartment. Now, I know you're all downtown enthusiasts, so don't shout at me. I know that this is an illegal view, and there's no way that this building could ever exist above the Capitol height preservation limit, but bear with me on this. What makes this cool is that's actually what that view you're looking at is a real 360-degree photo, and the VR team actually built this virtual reality platform within it. And when you're moving around the apartment, you'll see different objects. So right here, you can see that Union Terrace chair in the corner. And when you hover over that and you click on it, you're transported to a 360-degree experience of what it's like to be at the Memorial Union on a summer evening. There's a kayak in another corner. When you click on that, you can be on Lake Monona at sunrise. If you flip through that magazine on the coffee table, there's a lot of different experiences that you can jump to, like being on the bluffs at Devil's Lake. And the cool thing about this is it continues to evolve. So this is actually an outdated video of what that experience actually looks like. You can flicker the light switch and outside becomes daytime versus nighttime. You can play with a calendar and see the different seasons throughout the year. And we're continuing to build more and more because this actually has had some success. A lot of employers have been using this when they've been working to recruit. In fact, if you are going to be at any UW athletic event this weekend, you might see our cameras out there. We're going to be on the 50-yard line for the game against Ohio State. Check that. The Ohio State filming some experiences of what game day is like, as well as to be courtside at the Kohl Center. And now there's new ways for you to actually experience this. You can go to meetmadison.com/view, and you can view this stuff on your desktop. If you have a cardboard reader, this is a QR code that you can actually put your phone in, and you can see what these different experiences look like. So it's very cool, very exciting stuff. I hope you guys get a chance to take a look at it. But in addition to experiences, again, we know everybody's telling a different story. We know we need to create more content that actually puts all of these pieces together, but also under the umbrella of our seeker brand positioning. So if we know that everyone's telling a different story, like how do we do that? How do we make that stick? So here's a quick story. This is an interview several years ago. The person on the left is the founder and CEO of a San Francisco-based publicly traded tech company. And at the time of this interview, they had just selected their second US hub that they wanted to locate. And they had explored all of the cities that you might think of when I say tech city. But ultimately, they chose Madison, which was really exciting. And in the short time, the person on the right is at the time, he was a managing partner of one of the largest venture capital firms in the world. And he just had a couple of minutes to interview this founder. And he spent more than a couple of minutes having him explain, why are you in Madison? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And you could tell from his tone exactly what he was thinking about in terms of brand awareness. And it wasn't innovation. And when he was talking about, well, how would you even get the talent, right? Or the talent that actually exists in Wisconsin. And he wasn't thinking, again, about innovation. So seeing the issue, we started to get to work and started reaching out. And by that, I meant we started harassing this dude on Twitter and others as well. And we said, look, there's a really good story that's developing here in Madison, and we want you to understand it. So how about this to all the venture capitalist community? What if on our dime, we fly you to Madison, we curate, we introduce you to companies that are new and emerging, as well as enterprise. We introduce you to folks at the university, Madison College, government leaders, get you out in the lakes and send you home. Like, who would say no to that, right? Everybody said no to that. Nobody was interested. They're like, not worth my time. So it became pretty clear that we had some work to do. And so we reverse engineered the concept and we said, okay, what if we came to you? What if we came to San Francisco and brought companies with us and started to tell that story? Would you take those meetings? And they said yes. And there's been a lot of success over the decade with this initiative. It's been named a best practice by the International Economic Development Council. Steve Case from AOL has listed it as a best practice with his Rise of the Rest Summit. And we're going back next week, again, to continue to tell this story and bring companies with us. And honestly, these companies, they could probably get these meetings on their own, but the value of all of us going together is that collective voice, right? The same reason why you're members of DMI and the power of that collective voice. And the companies are all going to bring their pitch decks and they're going to pitch. They're going to talk about what they do, why there's opportunities. Hopefully they get some attention and maybe some investment associated with that. But in addition to the companies all giving their pitches, we bring our pitch deck as well. And we talk about the broader story about what's going on in Greater Madison. And so since we're going out next week, we thought it would be kind of helpful to us to kind of do a dry run of this pitch and give you a peek behind the curtain of how we sell this room. So that's what I'm going to do today, if that sounds good to you. But first, a couple of disclaimers. As mentioned, the pitch focus changes depending on the audience. In this case, this is a pitch that's focused on venture capitalists. So we're going to talk a lot about innovation, industries that are specific to innovation, new and emerging companies. Missing from this is a lot of the livability piece of this that probably would dominate a more talent-focused pitch. But I thought that was okay because I feel like everybody in this room knows the livability pitch and all the great reasons to live here. Importantly, as Dan mentioned as well, we're not perfect. Mark's close to perfect. We covered that, close, but we're not perfect. There's a lot of problems that we are solving right now that organizations like ours, DMI, and many others work every day to try and get progress on, right? The disparities that exist in our workforce, in our schools, our infrastructure challenges, our housing shortages, our access to childcare, rising costs. There's a lot, right? We're not perfect. We are all working to get there. But there is a very encouraging story to tell. There's very positive things. And so we're going to focus on that right now. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. And hopefully at the end of this time, this short pitch, you'll agree and I'll have you convinced that this is the place to be. So are you ready? All right. Thank you very much. Let's put 15 minutes on the clock. You are all officially venture capitalists. Please put on your Patagonia vests. Okay. As an investor, you're all looking for the next big thing, right? You're staring into your crystal ball and you're trying to figure out where that next big thing is going to occur. But you're not just going to take a risk unnecessarily. You're not looking for these flash in the pan moments. You want to follow the trend lines. Those trend lines, if you're really looking at the data, can lead you to make it a more calculated risk on where there's going to be better opportunity. And I think that you don't need to look into a crystal ball to see, if you're following those trend lines, where that next big thing will be. If you're following those trend lines, it's going to occur right in Madison. And that's not to say that Madison is the next big thing, but rather that the next big thing is going to happen here because of what we have here, because of the talent that we have here, because of the industry diversity and advanced industries that excel here, all built on top of the livability metrics that we've known for decades, that this is a great place to live. So to understand the trend lines, first, we have to start by going backwards. So 8 to 10 years ago, we started to see some change, right? Suddenly, young people were choosing to start their careers here and in high numbers. So the Brookings Institution, so a leading economic think tank in DC, was studying where millennials were moving to, where they were getting hired. And here's what they found: that Madison had the #1 percentage of their population in the millennial generation, and #2, just behind Boston by 1/100% in terms of college-educated millennials in our workforce. That was at the time age 25 to 34. And if you look at the other cities on this list, it's quite an aspirational list of communities. I think we can all agree. In fact, 3 out of every 4 new Madison residents were actually in this millennial demographic. And this transition from kind of a fun college town to an emerging innovation hub was reflected in the region's economic impact on the state, with Madison for the first time surpassing Milwaukee in terms of our overall collective property value. Now, when the pandemic started and cities were focused on relief, they're focused on recovery and thinking through how can we get through this quicker? How can we get back and recover faster? There was reason for optimism that a region like Madison was going to do better than most. One of the reasons was because of the diversity strengths of our economy. In fact, the Madison metropolitan area was named as having the most industry diverse economy in the country. Here's what this looks like. As you can see, not one specific industry is dominating the other in terms of the overall share of our workforce. This is really helpful. And over time, historically, has helped us stabilize during economic downturns, while some other cities that might be all in on one particular industry has to ride the waves. So many national studies and assessments were backing up this speculation that our recovery might be faster. In this case, Bloomberg here thought that our driver industries were going to be really helpful, pointing out specifically IT, gaming, both resilient during the pandemic, that would be favorable towards our economic conditions. Same thing when you look at the top 5 metropolitan areas that they thought would recover faster. Again, it's a similar cropping of cities, right? And it's cities that you wouldn't normally think Madison might stack up next to each other, with San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Seattle, Boston. Forbes and Moody's Analytics also did a similar assessment here. They were looking at cities that they thought had a low population density and a high level of educational attainment that would both be favorable towards economic recovery. You can see Madison here had a specific call out within that study saying that they predicted a surge of growth in the years to come. And that growth, if you're looking at now, we're just starting to see some of the data coming out from those pandemic years. And it's letting these prognosticators pat themselves on the back a little bit, because we know from the 2020 census that Dane County actually grew by 73,000 residents over that time, fastest growing in the state. That's a trend line as well. But also, we had the fastest proportional growth change, the largest numeric change, and something that you might not know is that Madison's now actually the 15th largest city in the Midwest. And if you compare the other cities that are on this list among the Midwest, what you see is during those years, we're the only city on that list that was actually growing. So people were moving here, and we were finding that they were actually tech savvy. So in this analysis by LinkedIn, Madison had the highest inflow to outflow of tech workers over these years, a 3.5 times separation between the #1 city on that list, Madison, and the #2 city on that list in terms of the biggest gains in that ratio, gaining 1.77 tech workers for each one who leaves. That led to Madison being ranked and considered as the most resilient technology hub city between December 2019 and May 2021. I know what you're thinking. Millennials are old news, right? Sorry to the millennials in this room, you're old now. What about the next generation of young workers? What about Gen Z? Well, the trend lines are continuing, with Madison being a top 10 metro for net migration of Gen Z workers. So this is important. This is just volume, right? Compared. It's not a concentration or density relative to our size. This is just sheer volume. We have a top 10 in migration of Gen Z workers, which explains why LinkedIn says that we are actually #1 in the country for new Gen Z hires. In fact, we're one of just 5 metropolitan areas where Gen Z makes up more than 20% of our workforce. So as a chamber, that's really great because it's relying less on our outbound communication to try and convince people. They're seeing it on their own through these different various rankings about the talent that exists here, about the employment opportunities, about the culture, about entertainment, about best places for jobs, best places for fun, and relative affordability to the other major metros that exist on the coasts. Which is why we're seeing more headlines like this one, moving from the coasts to Madison because they can afford to live here. They can afford to live the way they want to live, with big city amenities, yet still feeling part of a smaller and connected community. And if we know Gen Z wants to be here, one would certainly think that we stand to be best positioned to land some of the many graduates for the advanced degree holders that are graduating from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And that is true. And if you look at the expanded high-tech pipeline that UW-Madison has, and in this case, we're just going to look at the growing School of Computer, Data, and Information Sciences. Just 10 years ago, that school was graduating only 200 graduates a year, right? Being fought at by tech companies across the globe. Well, this spring, we're going to see that number increase by 13-fold. And that's true for our other post-secondary education institutions as well. Madison College is at the forefront of upskilling digital skills, not just at that post-secondary level, but also offering dual enrollment opportunities for younger students as well. So a lot of encouraging news on a younger and growing workforce. Let's talk specifically about industries. So I mentioned earlier about a diverse industry skill set, and that's true. There's a lot of diversity in our economy. But what makes us special? What makes us unique? What are those driver industries that Forbes was talking about that's really creating more jobs and a multiplier effect in our region? To help provide some data to show where we stand in that regard, things are going to get a little bit nerdy. So have some coffee, stay with me on this one. We're going to talk about location quotients. So LQ it compares the concentration of jobs in a specific regional economy and compares that same industry to the national economy to have an assessment of where we're doing in terms of industry concentration. So the baseline metric is 1.0. So most communities have a 1.0 LQ for things like grocery stores and gas stations, right? The population and market tends to work those things out where most communities have these things at the same proportion. If you have an LQ below 1, it means you have a lower concentration to the national economy, less competitive advantage. So as an example, Oil extraction, Madison has about as close to zero as you can get for our concentration of oil extraction jobs. Odessa, Texas, off the charts. So if anything above one, though, that's what we're looking for. That tells you where you have a higher concentration to the typical city. So anything above one is good and tells you what your competitive edge is. So where are our competitive edges? So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from this point forward, I'm just going to say BLS, has 22 major employment categories. And the Madison metropolitan area has a concentration, an LQ above one, in 10 of those 22 categories. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of them in this 15-minute pitch. I'm instead just going to focus on the employment categories where BLS considers to be STEM occupations, right? So life, physical, social science occupations, computer and mathematical occupations, architecture and engineering occupations. Why that matters is based on their analysis. Those professions are expected to grow at a 2x margin to a non-STEM occupation, and the median annual STEM wage is more than 2 times that of a non-STEM occupation. So how are we doing? When you look at all the detailed occupations that fit, the specific jobs that the Bureau of Labor Statistics defines as a STEM occupation, 82% of those jobs, we have a high concentration of. We have a competitive advantage. Meaning if you're looking to start a new and emerging company in a STEM-related field, you are going to have the diverse skill set that you need to actually be successful at doing it. That's why we continue to show up in rankings like this as one of the top cities for STEM professionals. When you look at the overall diversity of job opportunities, when you look at the educational attainment rate, if you're looking to start a business, as well as our livability. Let's dive deeper into computer and mathematical occupations. So here's a list of the 19 detailed jobs that fit under this classification. And when you look at it, you probably think of, if I were just to say a tech job, it's going to appear on this list, right? So you see software, you see the back hardware side of things. And for here, Madison is pretty exceptional. We've been a top 15 metro in terms of our concentration of these types of jobs for a long time, oftentimes actually in the top 10 alongside the other tech metros that you'd expect me to say: San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Seattle, Austin, Boston. They're all there as well as Madison. And similar to our diversity in STEM occupations, in 16 of the 19 detailed types of jobs, we have a location quotient value over 1, meaning we have a high concentration of these professionals in our area. And this is important because 4 of the top 11 fastest growing occupations in the country are in this employment category. Software developers are the 3rd highest job growth by volume, and we've had 42% growth over the last decade, the largest among our advanced industries. Speaking of advanced industries, that's another measurement that we can look at and assess how we're doing in terms of STEM fields. So this started from research, again, from Brookings Institution, that was looking at, they identified 50 individual R&D and STEM knowledge intensive industries. Why that's important is because they determined from their research that for every one of these advanced industries, an additional 2.2 jobs are created elsewhere. So again, it's another multiplier effect, bringing more wealth into your community that can hopefully recirculate as many times as possible before leaving. So if you look at our advanced industries that are on that list, and in this list, I just pulled everything that had more than 15 businesses that are hiring for these types of jobs, and again, has an LQ above 1. And here's what those advanced industries in our community looks like. And you can see it's at the intersection of research, health, and technology. And over the last decade, we've had 150% job growth in scientific research and development services. We've had 61% growth in pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturing. And we've had 56% growth in software publishing. More on software publishing. So if you're looking at, if I had asked you to guess which cities you think have the highest concentration of software jobs, you'd probably think about Seattle, you'd probably think about Silicon Valley, and you wouldn't be wrong. That's 1 and 2, right? The land of Microsoft, Amazon, and all of the different companies in Silicon Valley. But what might surprise you is who's 3rd on that list, and that's Madison, as having the 3rd highest concentration of software jobs. And if you're wondering if this is just one company who's hiring all these jobs, you would be wrong. More than 100 businesses are currently hiring right now based on the latest data for these jobs. So yeah, go ahead, Chris, like be surprised. Like it's pretty incredible. And in fact, oftentimes we're actually the 2nd highest concentration of jobs, beating Silicon Valley. Again, these trend lines were happening before the pandemic even started. This chart looks at the years 2010 to 2019 and overall technology employment growth. So the further up on this chart denotes the amount of growth. The further to the right actually shows the amount of market share nationally that you're actually gaining in technology jobs. So you want to be up, you want to be to the right on this chart. Madison is the red dot, right? So you can see we've had steady growth in these jobs. But what's interesting is that we're actually on the right side of that axis, which is interesting because we're actually one of only 11 metropolitan areas that not only grew jobs during this decade, but actually increased our national market share of these types of jobs. And we're far and away the lowest metropolitan area in that list. The second lowest of that 11 has more than 2 million people. That continued during the pandemic. So again, we're just unpacking some of the data from that as well. But if you remove metropolitan areas with fewer than 5,000 jobs, Madison is in the top 5 overall in terms of our technology job growth. That's not to say that there wasn't still growth among the superstar coastal metros. There was, but you're starting to see more areas on the mid-continent area growing at a higher percentage. So let's talk about another one of those employment categories, the life, physical, social sciences. So this is a lot of the scientific, medical, R&D, and naturally you'd think, being in the shadow of a world-class research institution, that we'd do fairly well in this category, and you would be right. We're a top 10 metropolitan area. If you remove those that have fewer than 5,000 jobs and you have a higher LQ concentration of at least 1, we've routinely, consistently been in the top 10 in terms of our concentration of these types of jobs. You look at everybody else in this list, it's exactly who you'd think it would be, right? The Research Triangle, Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, and others. Also, interestingly, it's where we're currently seeing most corporate interest and investment that's occurring within this space. So that's what's happening now. Let me tell you about what's happening next. Greater Madison continues to have the most deal flow in the state. So typically it's around half of all deal flow in the state for new and emerging companies is happening in Madison. Last year was at 44%. And 8 of the 10 largest overall deals for startups happen for Madison area-based companies. You see continued substantial backing for Wisconsin's only unicorn company, which for this room means you have a valuation of over $1 billion. We happened to bring this company to all of you venture capitalists when they were seeking an early seed stage round. So I'm sorry if you didn't get in on that at that time. But you also see companies that are literally working to change the world right now in terms of energy, healthcare, technology. So the future is bright, and it's about to get a lot brighter because we're really well positioned to take advantage of some pretty big federal opportunities that were just announced. One of them comes with the passage of the Federal CHIPS Act. So a lot of attention was given to the amount of money that's going to be invested in new semiconductor manufacturing chips and other elements of basic research, which is important. But within this program, or within this bill, was another program that's focused on maintaining our innovation competitive edge as a national economy. And that's called the Regional Technology and Innovation Hub Program. This concept goes back to the advanced industry research that I mentioned earlier. And what they found, in addition to the multiplier effect that these types of jobs had, why they're important to our economic growth, is that from their standpoint, a troubling statistic that they found was in the decade that preceded when their research began, 90% of all of the job growth in this area occurred in just 5 metropolitan areas. That's it. And there are 5 metropolitan areas that continued to get more and more costly to live in, which baffled them because more traditional industries, oftentimes when costs get too expensive, someone will leave, the market balances this stuff out. But what they found with these advanced industries, that it didn't work that way. That these types of jobs, these investments were being made with cost not being the leading factor, because they needed a very specific ecosystem to support their company's growth. That's why they continued to invest in these areas. So what they thought, Brookings, is that if we're going to really ramp up our nation's competitive edge in these industries, we need to help more metropolitan areas become these healthy ecosystems where these types of jobs can thrive. But the thing is, it can't be for everybody. This isn't an economic gardening principle where we're seeding areas that don't have these jobs. You have to invest in specific ecosystems that have the ingredients needed to help these industries thrive. And so from their research many years ago on this, when they were saying we need a federal policy intervention, here are some sample criteria that you can use to assess the communities that would be good to invest significant resources into. And Madison was far and away labeled as the best bet for this type of a program, that all of the tools were there. And now this program's a reality. So what's the latest news on that front? First, Over the summer, a consortium of public and private partners came together for a Wisconsin proposal that's focused on a real strength of ours, and that's personalized medicine. And it covers the geography from Milwaukee to Madison. And it's a story that we've been telling for a while. In fact, we believe that if you're looking to solve a problem in healthcare, there's no better place in the country to do that than here. You have literally everything that you could want in terms of the great research talent that exists here. The delivery of care, payers, providers, manufacturers, technologists, all right here. And if we can bring these pieces together and with the right kind of boost from a federal level, imagine what we could do to provide more advanced and more personalized patient care. Well, just last week, it was announced that our state's proposal was officially granted one of the 31 Phase 1 Technology Hub designations and one of just 29 strategy grant recipients. So this is a very exciting start that's leading to Phase 2, which will culminate in early 2024, when 5 to 10 of these hubs are going to be awarded an investment of between $40 to $75 million. And if this program is appropriated at the level that it was anticipated that it would, it requires further appropriations by Congress. It's not just millions, but billions of dollars that are going to be invested in these very few metropolitan areas, because the goal and objective of this program is that you have to create globally sustainable innovation centers within 10 years. So it's not a big look to the future. It's now. This is going to be happening now, and we're best positioned to do that. So our resiliency is going to be tested as a community. And I want to talk about climate. And I know what you're thinking. Why would you close when giving a pitch on Madison, Wisconsin on climate? Well, if climate change is shaping property values and where people are choosing to live, there are factors that you want to consider to avoid extreme weather events. So CBS News did an analysis on this, and they were looking at where you'd want to be. Well, certainly you want to be far enough to the east to avoid wildfires, something I know this room cares a lot about and deals with on a regular basis. You want to be far enough inland to avoid rising seas and flooding. You want to be far enough to the west and north to avoid hurricanes. You want to be mindful of where there are droughts and seek out places where there's an abundance of fresh water. And you also want to be far enough north to avoid the worst of heat waves. And yes, I see that, Madison's actually embedded within one of those heat waves, which we are considered because our climate is actually increasing in temperature. And based on all of these different factors on where to avoid extreme weather events, the direct quote from this report by CBS News is that there's one place that fits all of this criteria. So this was their exact quote, which is why I don't think you need to look into a crystal ball. Right? If you're following the trend lines, if you're looking where talent is choosing to be and continuing to grow younger, more technology savvy, and also in alignment where these advanced industry jobs are not only growing at an accelerated level now, but is well positioned to really scale up in the future, all of this points to the same thing. Hopefully that's my 15 minutes. It proves why we believe that Greater Madison is not just ground level for the next big thing, but ground level for your next big thing. Thank you. How'd I do? Are you sold? Do you want me to take any questions, Mark? How are we doing on time?
I know there's a microphone down here for the Gen Zs and the Gen X.
Donahue.
After you give that pitch, is there consistent feedback that people provide you afterwards that they're learning or that they've learned from that pitch that excites them?
Sorry,
Is there certain feedback? Yeah, the reaction.
So I'll tell you specific. So this was, again, a venture capitalist focused pitch. When we started doing this 10 years, I mean, it was positively received, but I will tell you, it still felt like a little bit of condescension, like, oh, that's nice. That's great to see that you have some good things going on. But a lot has changed, not just in our community, but the overall VC landscape. There's a big FOMO effect when it comes to investors. You don't want to miss out, like I said, on the next big thing. And what happened is you started to see companies throughout what was considered the mid-continent, so off the coasts, that were getting big investment deals, and they were realizing that they could have a better valuation and lower cost of business doing that. And as more venture capitalists started doing that, they started to realize, hey, you know what? I don't mind getting on a plane or even 2 planes to go to a board meeting. Like I can actually build $1 billion business in other places. So that trend was happening, but the Madison pitch has definitely changed a lot. And I'll give you an example of that. So I mentioned that, we couldn't even get people to fly on a plane on our own dime. Well, I'll tell you that I don't get calls right now that are saying, hey, I'm sending my whole team to Madison for the week. Introduce me to companies where we're really devoting a lot of energy to Madison. I don't get that yet. But what I do get is I'm spending some time in Chicago. I want to come up for the day to Madison. Here's what I'm looking for. Can you introduce me? I can also tell you that the amount of investment deal flow that's actually happening from coastal investors has increased significantly in the last decade. So I think that there is a lot of traction. I think people get it, that you can build billion-dollar businesses in Wisconsin, but that still doesn't change the fact that we need to continue to repeat and let them know again that it's not just a flash in the pan moment, but that it's a trend line that you need to continue to follow and be plugged in on. I can't speak to Iowa Hawkeye football. I refuse to talk about that, but I can, yeah.
When speaking like your pitch, and I'm big on Madison, but like when speaking your pitch to like people like who are Black, and Madison being such a good place,
yeah,
but also being a not really great place for African American people. Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I would say that, as I mentioned, the pitch is very different depending on the audience. So here we're talking to venture capitalists, right? This is a very specific focus, which is why we're talking about specific industries, specific types of investments that have been made. So that's why in a 15-minute room, that's what we're talking about. To a talent-focused pitch is very different. And also, so you said specifically to a person of color and what that pitch looks like. And it goes back to the slide I think gave earlier that it has to be authentic, right? Which means that it has to be other voices as well that are a part of telling that story and actually explaining like, this is what the lived experience looks like. And you're right, it isn't perfect. You can't hide behind the numbers of what exists here. But it also emphasizes the importance of all of the important work that we have to do to continue to hopefully find opportunities for people to feel a sense of belonging and actually realize opportunity. So one of the things that we're doing as an organization, we have a whole platform called DHEI, which stands for Diversity, Inclusion, Justice, and Equity. There's a website that's launching. We're working in partnership with Henry Sanders and Madison 365 Nation to build up more content that comes from actually authentic voices that are in this community about what life is like here. The good, the bad, the employment, the things that exist that are here. That's one piece of the attraction part of it, but then there's also a whole nother part on retention, right? And how we're actually advancing opportunity as a community and putting energy into it. So it is a different pitch than the venture capitalist pitch that we're giving. And again, I think with any pitch, it has to be authentic. It has to be real. And you can't hide from the fact that there are real challenges that hopefully people see that there's a lot of attention that's given. There's a lot of energy to make progress on that, but we're not there. We're not there yet.
And it starts on the ground. It starts we can pitch certain things, but what are doing to make it better? And because that's what's gonna make people want to invest here and be.
Yeah. I also think it's data too, right? And collecting that data to actually show that it's not anecdotal. Are we making progress, right? On employment categories, are we making progress? What types of jobs, right? How are things being accelerated? How can it be backed up by real data? And I think that's an important part of it too.
It's definitely collective.
Yeah, yeah.
Or do you know if the price of rent in Madison will go down or if it's going to keep going up?
Well, it's going up right now, right? I think we have the word crisis is being thrown around, and I don't think that's an overstatement in terms of our overall supply of housing in our region. We are behind. A lot of the cranes that are in that sky are working, but we need more. And I think one thing that's fortunate is I think city leaders and regional leaders all agree that this is a top issue. It's indisputable that we need to do more to increase a diverse supply of workforce housing. That's not going to be the only solution to doing that. But hopefully that will be part of the way for us to continue to accommodate this growth. Because again, this has been a trend line for a while. It's housing, it's transportation. There's a lot of things that are happening that it's great that more people are moving here and great that there's opportunity, but how are we staying ahead of it from an infrastructure standpoint? So I'd love to give you better news that things are going to get super affordable in the short term. But we've got work to do in that regard. But again, I'm still glass half full on that question, because I think there's a lot of leadership that's happening right now to try and do more to build up a diverse supply of workforce housing.
Oh, I got a question.
Wow, that's a lot, right? That's a lot. There's the geeks in the room are really happy this morning, all those numbers and all those trends. And but I think to some of the questions that were asked afterwards, there's an art to growth and there's a science to growth, right? And I think what we heard today is the science is in place. And if you listen to it, if you build it, they will come. Those revenues will come with those companies and with those industries. The art is, what are we doing with the revenue? And how are we bridging and fixing some of the problems in this community with this influx of growth and of revenue? So to be continued. Thank you, Kevin, for the presentation. And I'd also like to thank and close today's program with thanking our sponsors again. They should be above me. Carlson Black, O'Callahan, Battenberg, yeah, direction. Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, JP Cullen, Lake Ridge Bank, Urban Land Interests, EUA, and the Edgewater Hotel. Thank you all for coming this morning and have a good day.